Welcome to Dominating Your Investments. Dom Rinaldi here, and I have Codestrap finally on the show. I am so excited. We've just been so busy, the two of us. It's been hard to sync up, and the kids are in bed. Everyone's asleep. We're ready to rock and roll. So we're going to cover a lot of different topics. And yes, we have our bourbon ready to go. So we're going to cover a lot of different topics, and we're going to make sure to cut this up into different time segments because we want to make sure your time is very valuable and you'll be able to just go to the video of the topic of your choice. So we're going to be bouncing around here. So starting out, thank you for coming. And I look forward to doing more episodes with you.
Totally, man. Totally.
So I saw you first talking, well, first on the YouTube channels of all my friends with Amit, Tom, Chris, everyone. But I also saw you on LinkedIn when we were both on the LinkedIn Hyperauto demo, and with the people when the audio was going in video, going in and out, and it was buffering.
Oh God, that was terrible, dude. LinkedIn Live.
So bad for the Palantir guys, and people were leaving, and I was like, wait a minute, that's Codestrap on there. And so I started asking questions, and you started answering them. So I thought that was awesome.
I wonder if they're going to pay me to like keep answering questions on their LinkedIn.
Yeah, you were doing a good job because people were. I was like, well, we're not getting anything told to us because the video keeps crashing. So let's just ask questions.
Totally.
So starting out, I know that you're doing developer work with them for Foundry for Builders. Personally for you, and maybe some other endeavors in the future, and trying to get the awareness in the developer community about this awesome platform that Foundry is. Would love to really, and we're going to get technical in this part of the video, folks. So if you don't know what we're talking about, it's okay. We'll try to make sure to bring analogies. I'm sure Codestrap will be able to do a little better than myself. But there is this CI/CD pipeline. And what it is it's about continuous investigation and continuous delivery of your code when you build applications.
Continuous integration.
See, already, and I should actually know, because it's part of what I work in. But it's all around this platform of how developers, this framework on how developers build their code and deliver apps faster, right? And not having these monolithic applications, but instead being able to serve up an application when it's needed and then bring it back. And this gets into the technology that's really driving developers are driving this forward, is microservices and Kubernetes and containers. So I would love to just get your take on how Palantir leverages this, because I believe they have rubrics. Was there kind of Kubernetes language that they named it that they use, but they use Kubernetes essentially as the backbone for microservices. So just as a developer, what can you tell our developer community about what this differentiates when you get this up and running, and how it changes your workflows and allows you to deliver applications faster and just have more flexibility? You've now been doing this for a while, so I'd love to just get the user experience.
Yeah, I think so there are a lot of different actors within the org that can take advantage of Foundry. So it's not just developers, but their approach benefits all of them on some level, And if we look at it, like the foundations of Foundry is like any other one of these platforms. It's like get the data in and get it into a format where we can actually start asking questions. Because raw data is kind of useless. You don't ask questions typically of raw data because it's uninterpretable. So the biggest challenge always is, how do I get it in? And then how do I get it into a form in which a business analyst or someone can look at it and start seeing meaningful things, or data analyst? And so from the developer's perspective, they're kind of like the lowest layer of that cake in Foundry, is like the software developer, That doesn't mean that non-technical users can't analyze data. They can in Contour, and they can actually build full data pipelines in Contour. But the way it's built is they take this sort of Git ops, Git flow approach with everything in Foundry. So everything starts with code, and it's all versioned, and then it includes an integrated CI/CD build system. And it also deploys everything for you. And it actually interprets what to deploy from your code. So you never write infrastructure as code in Foundry. You just write business value, and it figures out what you need based on that and how to deploy it, how to
Wow,
optimize it for you. So
that's
like
different, right? That's different than
super different. Like people will often ask me, well, wasn't this the DI
that's
tool?
not standard in the industry, or they
Yeah.
have the tech out. Okay, so there's a
That's usually several years of work just to get to that layer for a technology company with a dedicated infrastructure team. Well, several dedicated infrastructure teams, not only to do the GitOps portion, but to operationalize all the code repos that would be producing data pipelines and transformations and all that stuff.
So is it fair to say when you explain that there, because I don't want our listeners to miss out, is already we're talking about a differentiator that's providing automation for the developer and saving time, which we all know in the world of business, time is money.
100%.
Um,
Yeah, 100%.
that's
It's
good
like for the developer, it's like you're getting the equivalent of a Facebook light data engineering platform, you know. And I say light because Facebook has deeper integration into some of the tools that are used, and they created a lot of the tools that are used today. But Foundry is like you're getting the equivalent of a FANG company's data engineering platform, like light version, with no work. You just walk in, you've already got CI/CD, you've got code management, change management, integrated GitHub with custom security model. It's not GitHub, it's their own Git implementation. Everything's versioned, everything's controlled, everything's secure, like day zero, and you can just focus on writing data transforms.
they're not going to GitHub or GitLab to get their code and their repositories.
It's all integrated straight into Foundry.
People don't understand that's
Yeah.
not normal, guys. Like
Yeah.
I know we're getting nerdy here, but for those developers and those, let me put it in layman's terms, the easier way of. So GitHub and GitLab are these companies. I believe both are public now,
Yep.
or maybe one of them are. I can't remember, but they are an open source platform that allow you to put different code repositories and different pieces of libraries of code together so developers can grab, hey, I need this piece of code for my application here, I need this or that.
Yep.
Oh, someone wrote a great piece here. Well, with that, there's also a lot of challenges because there can be nasty code put out there by nation states and cyber attacks, and we're seeing more of this in the world of Kubernetes. But you're saying they approach it differently.
Yep.
In that
They're
they
security first platform. So
yeah.
like they have their own version control implementation of Git. It's got their own security model on top of it. And what's cool is that's also integrated with their own ingress and egress rules. So like you can't install packages that have been like activism now is a big thing in people who maintain open source packages, whether it's npm or maven or whatever. And Foundry will allow you to like totally control the egress and ingress too. So like if you don't want public installs of packages happening, that won't happen in Foundry.
Oh wow.
Like and the reason they can do that is they have an online IDE, and like they control a lot of this by using the online IDE. So like you don't even need to use a local software environment, like development environment. You can actually program straight in the web browser, and they can like control a lot of the dependencies and packages that are included in there. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
I gotta be careful because I work for a security company, and we do some similar things in some areas of industry. I keep it high level, but what I'm just hearing, you can see me blushing of excitement. This is when we talk about when Foundry is 10x better than any application out there. These are examples here, and those who are used to this language in SaaS-based container and developer world will understand exactly what you just said there, of the value propositions there. So let's maybe take it a little higher level, so we don't bore the audience with all our developer talk, but we're now transitioning, and we're seeing here, and I have the IR News website pulled up. We've seen several substantial partnerships coming out with different companies in different specific industries.
Yep.
And I shot a couple different videos that are coming out here soon on this, and I thought it was very interesting that in 2021, we saw them build out on the website their big claim of 40 different industries that they support. Now it's 50. Yep. They outline them in the website. You guys, I encourage you to go look at it. A lot of them are in critical infrastructure, which is key, right? Especially for our country and for really, from a security perspective, you want your critical infrastructure for a security first company If they're able to add value to our critical infrastructure as a company and our Western allies, that's huge, because cyber warfare is happening.
Yep.
And we're seeing them, though, brand and modularize Foundry to solve specific use cases and learning about the businesses or industries so that way it can be replicable to other companies and almost building platforms. So maybe you can explain first how, because I'm doing a lot of talking here and you're the guest, and they want to hear you talk anyways, is Skywise is a great example of a platform or module that now is adopted across 130 airlines, and it's pretty much the standard for the airline industry. What have you taken away in other industries that they're doing? We just offline, we were talking about Transfigura with supply chain and carbon emissions. We can talk about Stellantis. Tell me your thought process here, because I think we had an interesting dialogue about this offline.
So yeah, the strategy makes a lot of sense once you understand how Foundry changes the SaaS paradigm. So like typical SaaS is you have a REST API or a set of REST APIs that you invoke, and you'll basically be transferring data from your org over to this other org, and then they have a GUI that sits on top of it and like helps you understand it or push it around. Basically every SaaS product does that, whether it's Bamboo HR or whether it's Google Analytics or whether it's some other thing. All that's happening is data is moving through really dumb pipes through a REST API, and there's some app somewhere that transforms it, molds it, does some transaction processing with it, and gives you some visualization of the data. That's it. That's all SaaS really does. And what Palantir did was say, let's freaking stop doing that, because it creates innumerable data silos. It creates hundreds of offerings that often overlap. And it's actually hard for you to do anything meaningful at the integration layer, because the integration layer is REST. It's the API layer, right?
So hold on, we're talking language that not everyone, your normal, not technology person, and maybe they're interested in investing in Palantir. The data has to be usable to make decisions. What you're trying to do with data is get outcomes. And what you just said there is 70% of the world uses SaaS, and we're all just doing open APIs, which just are plugins that allow you to take your data and bring it into another product, another pane of glass, and see it and try to use it, try to manipulate it. But what you're saying now, you can expand on. They're actually
and also the outgrowth of the shitty user experience that results from that, because you're often jumping through 7 different products to get one sliver of insight. So it's like, who here has to log in like 5 times a day through Okta? Like who here has, like that experience is terrible. But also that your data now is owned by this other company, right? So like, why is it that I have to pay extra to get my data out of there once I put it in there? Like, so that's usually, falls under enterprise licensing to get the data out. Getting the data in is usually free. Getting the data out is actually like a 6-figure deal in most cases, So anyway, there's that side effect of the way things operate today. So what Palantir did is they said, you know what, let's bring the apps to the data, right? And so what they did is they created this system where you can actually build full-blown applications from data transformation to visual UI, like the equivalent of what a software engineering team can build. And you can package those as templates and then ship them to other Foundry users. So like I can build a full-blown thing like HyperAuto, right? And I can build it inside Foundry. And if the feature doesn't exist, the Palantir core team adds it. But like a good example of this is like they built Skywise in Foundry, right? They built it with the low-code tools in Foundry. And when I say like Palantir eats their own dog food, like they're building huge multi-million-dollar software applications inside Foundry using the same tools that you'll have access to. So yeah, you can absolutely displace every SaaS product on the market, bring the app to the data. And the cool thing about that is that because Foundry is a big data OS, no matter what app you build in there, the data now is accessible, right? So it's like you can understand it. But now,
what's the go through 7 panes of glass?
Yeah, exactly. But then like the strategy starts to make sense to you when you go, oh, well, if they have one archetype, like one customer who is the prototype for an industry, and they solve that architecture and they package it up as an archetype, you now have every other person who talks about entities the same way, like does business the same way as a locked in gotta be customer, And then when you layer in on top this idea that Foundry instances can talk to each other. They can share data without replication. They can do these kind of really crazy ways in which the data does not need to live in your Foundry instance in order to analyze it. Then you have this idea that, holy shit, not only are all those customers going to benefit from all the apps I built in here and I can ship to them, they can now connect data to each other, right? So like, I don't even have to have the data in my Foundry instance to take advantage of an archetype.
So are
That's a
you
bit
saying that
speculative
you could
because
use
I
a
haven't played with that feature, but I've heard about it, you know?
Yeah, and I've heard about this too. I read it through the supply chain management platform that they're building out with Transfigura.
Yep.
Basically, the way I understand it is they can use those Foundry archetypes and connect into things like Snowflake to your proprietary apps, whatever, and analyze that data and make use of value, even though if it doesn't live inside of Foundry. So now
Big time, big time. But it's also like, there's two layers to it. It's like, what they can do with Foundry's software-defined data integrations that are part of the archetypes is just get the raw source data that's sitting in either an ERP system, a system like Snowflake, like a data warehouse, S3, like raw data. And based on the analysis that the intelligence that they've built does, it determines what kind of data it is, but then it'll produce all of the data pipelines and the ontology that's associated with that. So like a lot of what a data analyst does is put data, raw source data into like this meaningful structure in which you can
Right.
actually get value out of it. But they've got software that does that, you know, which is fucking crazy.
That's where we're talking about offline. And I was wondering, how long does that take to get all that data into the Foundry platform?
If there's an archetype that stays zero, you know, like it's just the processing time to actually bring the data in.
There's
That
a
can be several
timeline to
days.
build the archetype, right?
Well, there's a lot of existing ones though, you know. So like every partnership they have has an associated archetype with it.
You're never starting from ground zero. You're
You're
starting
never
a
really starting
framework.
from ground zero. Yeah, exactly.
That's
So, and
so
the more, and this is now think of the network effects of that, right? Like the more people that create archetypes and the more people that use Foundry, the more value that build this platform.
I'm getting excited here. I just want to say, people, listen, enterprise, small business, listen, reduce your time to get value. That is what we're doing in business. And what this is doing for the developer community, these software, because at the end of the day, software is trying to drive an outcome, right? Like we always hear software is eating the world. Maybe you can say now microservice, whatever. You're trying to get faster time to value to have a competitive edge and drive a great customer experience. And starting not from ground zero and starting with a framework in place that's relevant to my industry and what I'm used to is game changing. And if I understand it right, with Skywise, it was actually built, like Airbus created apps on Foundry to make their own program, calling it Skywise.
That's exactly right.
And it's their baby. It's just the OS was Foundry.
I mean, Palantir helped a lot, you know.
Right. I'm not discrediting Palantir, but it's, you can build your company's like Wejo.
Yeah, there's literally nothing you can't build, in my opinion. It's like the equivalent of a Turing complete programming language, but it's like it's a set of tools that solves every app you'd want to build, every category problem in an app you want to address.
If I'm a
But
developer,
with visual tools, right? With like visual drag and drop tools as opposed to having to write code, you know.
If I'm a developer, why wouldn't I want to build on that?
They do. I mean, once people understand it, they do. Every developer wants to be on there, in my opinion. Some get intimidated. Some have arguments over the layout of the UI, or like, oh, I don't want to work on an online IDE. I'd prefer to work offline, which they support as well. Like, there's little disagreements in there, but everyone gets excited once they see once they understand the amount of value they can ship, and the wheels start turning, and they go, oh, all those things that were hard and slowing me down last year, they all become easy. And then I can start shipping the value that my boss wants to see, you know, like, and there isn't the hardest thing about Foundry is getting the data in initially, because I was telling you it's kind of like a security first platform. But then everything else downstream is so damn easy. And that's where like people who are normally stuck with the integration nightmares of like gluing together 15 tools to do something like this, they get excited because they're like, oh man, like I don't need to deal with 15 or 20 of these other tools. You know, I can drop those.
I mean,
not
if
have to
you're
deal
an
with that
IT
anymore.
team or an applications team, you can go back and say, look, I can save you this amount of money if you give me this money here to adopt this platform.
They're way happier with the headaches you're saving them, you know. Like it's never mind the money.
That's true. But at the end of the day, I think the CFO and the CIO and CEO care about
right. But there's another layer to the sharing. So like just understand that like there's that archetype feature, and there's that data modeling benefit along with the low code, no code tools. But the sharing capabilities are, businesses today still largely operate in a siloed model. Manufacturing that depends on supply chain does not, and they have like a consortium.
Sure.
But those consortiums are painful to operate. There isn't necessarily a first party integration across all systems to keep them in sync. And what's cool about Foundry is, again, you can build these archetypes and template solutions, but the data doesn't need to live in your organization alone. And it's not REST APIs necessarily. I mean, there's REST in the middle of it, but what's cool is that I can build an archetype, but you can reference another Foundry instance as a data source, right? So if I'm in a consortium model and I have like maybe one part of the supply chain in my org, I can now use Foundry holistically for everything, but I can access your data too, and I can make changes against your data too as I'm doing things if I have the permissions to, right? So that,
Even
and
if
this,
they don't own Foundry?
what's that?
Even if they don't own Foundry for that
No,
order?
they have to be in Foundry. Like you're in Foundry, and you have to say hyper auto as your archetype. But maybe all the data isn't in your org. Maybe some of the data is in this other org, right?
But now
And
that I have it, I can bring, oh.
if both people are running Foundry, now you can start connecting those things. So you have apps that run across organizations, right?
You start
Which is
unifying markets. That's what you're
yeah,
doing. Is you're unifying, you're building platforms that are
they
then
will own every industry vertical. It's
like
really
like what I get really excited about, and then I start piecing this together, is compliance.
yeah.
You have to follow certain compliances, especially if you're in a federal government or regulated critical infrastructure organization. Even some commercial. I mean, you have PCI compliance, you have NIST, you have FERPA. I mean, there's so many compliances. So then you start building with this security first model, and you're saying, hey, I can follow all these frameworks and guardrails, and I can deliver time to value quickly, and it's in a language I understand. So maybe expand on that, or I can, either way, of some of these different deals and why they're so meaningful, because they've gone after some different industries, and I think we're going to see these turn into some different platforms similar to Skywine's.
I mean, I think Hyundai Heavy Industries is a really good prototype to look at, where there's clearly a huge network of suppliers, right? There's a huge labor force. You have, I think it's thousands of companies that interoperate amongst that network. It's pretty mental. Maybe it's hundreds. I think it's hundreds. So they got hundreds of companies that interoperate in there. And because, again, like really the core of Foundry is defining what we call the domain model, which is like the data model that describes the real things in the real world that you interact with. And it also describes their behaviors, like, and how they interact. So like if I perturb this element over here in the supply chain and it goes away, what happens downstream of that, kind of question.
Is that just the AI that knows that? Like it just,
there's more heuristic programming where you're defining functions and rules, but you can incorporate artificial intelligence to measure like the magnitude of effect of like changes and incorporate that in there. But what's cool about that, and understanding Hyundai Heavy Industries, where you have hundreds of people that are working together in a large supply chain, is like, if you can actually describe the data model correctly and build the digital twin for them, everyone can use that digital twin. Like every single person who works in that industry now has a shareable digital twin of what their work actually looks like in the real world. And if you actually hook them all up on Foundry, now they can actually move at the speed of the data stream. They're all seeing the same effects as to their actions, and they can mitigate those. They can implement remediation strategies. They can run what if scenarios together, but they can do that together in a way that like you can't really do today.
So like for instance, okay, they build out Hyundai. They could replicate that framework and that archetype, and you could have that for Toyota. You could have that for Ford, whoever. And
but think data first. It's like cars. It's like I can do it for cars.
right.
But think like ships.
Yeah,
I can do it for
exactly. Hyundai does a lot more than just cars. Yeah. So what you're doing though is you're giving them a framework to build off of, customized to their liking, and then they can communicate in, if it's in a consortium model or a platform model, where I'm sure a lot of car places that are still not EVs have to order parts from the same places, and they work with the same contractors, etc. You start seeing efficiencies, like what Alex Karp would say is alpha, right? You're getting
that's exactly right. Yeah, but it's more meta than that, in that like the first company to build it is producing the sort of digital representation of the business entities and the real world entities, you know. And that's the foundational thing that's inside Foundry. The ontology is the heart of Foundry, you know. And so when they do these partnerships, what I love is when I see a company like Hyundai Heavy Industries, it's like, oh yeah, you can model every entity in that process with them, not some supplier over here, you know. You actually are at the heart of everything. And as they acquire these customers and build these partnerships, if they are at the heart of an industry where they can effectively model the whole thing, that provides the springboard for like huge growth and network effects as more people use the system.
And
Because
that's
now
what we were talking
the
about
digital
offline.
twin of the industry is sort of mapped, you know.
We were talking about that offline, was
Yeah.
the network effects. It was
Yeah.
like a light bulb click, like the networking effects is massive.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
I'm reading
The
off
more
this.
people that are on it and use it together, especially in an industry consortium model, the more value is going to be generated for sure.
And then it's harder to walk away because,
Oh yeah.
you know, if you're
Why
like,
would you ever though? Like, why would you ever want to go back to the old way? You know?
well, I mean, look at the 130 airlines that use Skywise, right?
Yeah.
Like no one's walking away from. They're not going to be the redheaded stepchild who says, "No, I'm too good for that."
And the people that operate on it like it. You know, the net from what I hear from the people who've used it actually like it. You know.
And to your point, with even Skywise, those archetypes, and as long as the customer has Foundry, they're making those communications to contractors, to other people. So it's really completing the full life cycle of everything that's going on within that organization or that industry. So it's consequently making everyone better, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I always say like it's a 10xer for your workforce, you know, like like imagine you could take the same skills everyone has, and the only thing you change is implement this platform, and you can 10x the productivity of those people. Like, why would you not do that? You know, like it's
so I'm going to just share my screen here because we were talking about this offline with this new deal, and I'm going to actually have an episode that's coming out soon on the details of Transfigura. I know that's not exactly how it's pronounced, but forgive me. So with the supply chain carbon emissions platform market, like they were outlining how they had 10 million supply chain flows already integrated from, you know, they were running this in the acquire phase, looking at the Palantir build model, right? They still do that acquire, scale, expand. And they realized value so quickly. Then all of a sudden they're like, well, we'll soon be up to 700 million in here. And you see the value realized the more and more people that come into this platform. And so then they struck up this partnership. So I would envision that they would basically call this whatever Transfigura is, whatever they want to name it, their platform that would be like Skywise. It would be their platform for carbon emissions. And now and they came, but here's the beauty of it. They came out with Foundry for carbon emissions and 0 day, what am I trying to say? Net zero carbon emissions. And they came out with that like I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago. And now you're seeing it applied to customers. So is it fair to say, I don't know what you can and can't say, but is it fair to say that when they make those announcements, those products and modularized were probably based off of some kind of customer relationship that they're working through in that first initial stage, and probably saying, you know what, we can do Foundry for crypto, we can fix the blockchain, or we can do Hyundai and transportation. So it's almost like they're finding out that they can build these certain platforms and that everybody has these certain problems.
I don't want to speculate too much, but
yeah, we're all speculating, but
I would, and again, I'm speaking for myself too, not Palantir. So
yeah,
I do have a relationship with Palantir. Full disclosure, I have access. They want me to say I need to say I've.
Say your disclaimer here now.
One, not investment advice. Number two, I have access to a free Foundry stack, and I do have a relationship with them in the developer space. But so I'm speaking for myself. But like, if I were, the analogy I always give is, if I were Andy Jassy back in the early days of cloud, right, and I weren't selling 3 services, IAM, S3, and EC2, right? But instead was selling.
Andy Jassy, that's the CEO.
That was the guy that was the former. I think he's now
AWS.
Yeah, but he ran web services, the AWS Web Services division forever. But like if I was Andy Jassy back in the day trying to sell the entire Amazon Death Star of all 200 plus services the day I went to market, everyone would have told them to fuck off, because no one would have been able to wrap their head around that, right?
Mhm.
And so what you need to do with a product like Foundry that is hundreds of microservices, it's hundreds of services, it's an incredibly deep platform that'll take you a really long time to understand, is you need to give people archetypes that apply directly to what they're trying to, problems they're trying to solve, and and having all these Foundry for crypto, Foundry for carbon emission, Foundry for hyper auto, it goes straight to the heart of like, this is how you, if you knew what you were doing and you were trained and certified and you had 2 years of experience, maybe this is what you would do to operationalize your data. You Hyundai Heavy Industries,
Yeah.
like whatever they
Call them
whatever they make.
Transfigura, but I know that's not how you
Yeah,
pronounce
yeah, yeah. But like that, I think that's really where this all comes from, is that they're trying to show people the applications of their product without them having to invest in learning it, and then they can more easily position it and sell it to them. But like, as to are they doing that with a customer relationship, I mean, if I had an industry expert, I wouldn't need one. I would just have an industry expert that would tell
it.
me like, what are the
There you
problems
go.
yeah,
Yeah, tell me what
yeah,
that, man, that'd be a good thing to do, is just say, let's understand these industries.
yeah,
Let's
exactly.
understand the problems that these industries have.
Yep.
Now let's go build out our teams to go fix these
Well,
problems and
now
found.
now apply that to the guy who just took over from SAP, like or not the guy, yeah, it was no, it was Salesforce. They just hired like a new head of sales for Europe that just came over from
Mhm.
Salesforce, and like, so maybe they're going after CRM next, like who knows.
Hyperauto, isn't that CRM?
Well, no, HyperAuto is more like supply chain management and stuff like that. So
Really?
yeah,
I really
yeah.
thought that they had a use case there for
They
unified.
might. They might. I don't know if they do. Like the part I was focused on was like where they're rebalancing parts between different plants and stuff like that.
Okay, I think maybe just one of the use cases of their videos, because I know when I got to speak to a sales rep at Palantir, they said, hey, we do this a lot. A lot of people have multiple ERP systems, multiple CRMs.
Yeah, it's like you didn't just get one of these, you got like 10 headaches, 10 ERPs.
Exactly.
All with like 100 plugins on each one. So
So we covered the industry piece, and I think they're going to do the same thing with Rubicon Technologies with
yeah.
waste management.
But I would pay close attention to who the big hires they make as an
Yeah,
indicator too, like a leading
that's actually a
indicator.
good point.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that. Let's talk about hiring.
Yeah.
We've seen all over Twitter, and I've checked in also on LinkedIn. That LinkedIn only just shows that, hey, we're growing at 10% rate already of adding new employees.
Yep.
That's massive, especially considering we're in a time where everyone's on a hiring freeze or a layoff.
It's like 120 or 150,000 layoffs last month in tech.
Yeah.
Google and Coinbase, I know, both rescinded offers for people who had already accepted, but before their first day rescinded. I think several companies did that. Everyone's hitting the pause button, and this is going to get way worse. Like in my opinion, what's being driven in the macro right now is like, no one knows where the bottom is. No one knows how bad this can get. And so everyone's afraid. And that leads to guidance that's like, buckle down, don't look for money,
Yep.
figure out, get a 3-year plan together.
Survive, right? Like,
Yeah,
especially
survive. Exactly.
And that's where, once again, not financial advice,
Yeah.
but I do like, when I invest, I like to make sure a company has no debt, or their debt could be paid off in cash in full.
Yep.
And they have high gross margins, reoccurring revenue, and high revenue growth. And they have something there that customers can't walk away from, right? And Palantir has all of that. And then sure enough, we laughed about it months ago, and they got about their $50 million of gold, and they said there's going to be a black swan event. I don't know. This looks pretty black swan to me.
I can't comment on the company financials again. I have a relationship.
Yeah. I'm just saying though, like, our housing market interest rates from January were 3%. Now it's 6.5. By the end of December, it could be up to 7.5, 8.
Everybody be telling their significant other, like, don't get you too used to that Zillow estimate.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And you can't sell because it's like, where do I go? Where
What are you gonna buy, dude? Like, we have a national housing shortage, and
yeah. I mean, I just heard on the news today it's you were having people bid on on houses. Now they're bidding on renting because they can't afford the mortgage to get a new house. So now they're bidding to,
Oh my God.
it's like, that's red flag on the field.
Well, I mean, bring it back to the hiring. Is like the cool thing is, so like my company, we're continuing to grow, and our goal is like when the dust settles, we're gonna be the only one left, and we're gonna grow and we're gonna dominate, and I think Palantir's strategy, if that happens, like because so many good people are being laid off too, like if this gets really bad, people will be going to Palantir, they're not gonna wait to get laid off, and like they're already a hard company to get hired at. They're right up there with the like probably harder than a lot of FANG companies. But like if the top talent decides to exit or gets laid off or whatever, like Palantir is going to have a field day. They're going to collect serious wins on the hiring front.
I would agree with that.
Get some wins they couldn't have gotten at another time,
No,
so
I would agree with that. So they still have
every company that's looking to grow and scale through this is looking at the layoffs, and they have a list, I'm sure, of people that
yeah, there's the people are watching LinkedIn more than ever. So we've covered the industry solutions. We've covered the CI/CD pipeline and how they're leveraging delivery of apps and the differentiations there, and also the macro of just how they're investing now for the future. Let's kind of talk also too about what Alex said in the interview 3 weeks now ago when he was interviewed by CNBC at the World Economic Forum, and they said, "Do you check the stock price?" He had to retract what he said because we know he checks the stock.
You have to. I mean, it's
I don't
all the time.
trust you say you don't.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he said that, but he then goes and says, "Well, no, because then the CNBC guy goes, well, do you care about your shareholders, your employees who are having to see everything they've worked for, crumble down to 75%?" He's like, if you're a shareholder of us, and I said this from day one when we went public, is it's not about what we're doing now. You should be concerned about what are we going to be like in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's what you're investing. That is what, and he has said, and I stand by that. Like he said numerous times, if you don't have a long time horizon, we are not the stock for you. Because
I would agree with that.
We are building.
Again, I can't comment on the stock.
We won't talk about the stock, but just that they are thinking big.
I agree that he had to retract his comments. I mean, everyone knows that you have to. I mean, it's part of your board meetings.
Yeah.
It comes into the financial guidance thing, and like a lot of decisions are made based on market conditions. Let's put it that way.
Sure. And I think one of the things that give me confidence in their mission and their execution, because I know we were pretty tough on them a couple of podcasts ago when I was with Chris, Amit, and Sakjan. Yes, there's other companies that have better salesmanship and delivery. We talked about this last time, Microsoft, and how Satya Nadella did the data mesh delivery. And
let me try I've heard all those conversations, but let me try and make my case for CARP is really a measure of a good leader is often to be right. Number one, you got to be fucking right. Okay. And number two is you need to keep everyone aligned, everyone has to believe in the mission. Everyone has to know this is achievable, and they need to believe that it's right. And I think CARP gets points on both those fronts,
I would hope
right. And everyone at Palantir, from what I've seen interacting, is so aligned and deeply respects that man, 100,000%. I don't care who you go to at Palantir, they're gonna respect Alex Karp, So that's pretty epic leadership. I mean, and they're not small. They're not a big company, but they're not small either. They're in that sort of mid phase.
From what I've heard and seen, they're not losing talent. People want to stay there. They are mission driven. So, to your point, they have a vision and a mission and a focus, and people want to follow him.
And the main reason I started really getting into Palantir was I felt like now I know, we definitely share a common vision on a lot of levels, both with the future, about tech, just a lot of things. So I think that you got to give them and who the fuck else would be able to pull that off, especially in tech today,
Right.
That's hard, man. Most people in tech are fucking stakeholder capitalists and are jumping between companies, and they're just there collecting RSUs half the time.
Seriously. And let's give him credit for way back when he took him to Colorado, right? They were before Elon left California, right? And then Elon, went to Texas, and other organizations started leaving Silicon Valley. So I guess my point on the sales execution is that they still can make it easier to understand what they're doing and quantify the ROI and take some of those best practices that other organizations, the industry itself in general does with case studies and how they market things and customer testimonials. I know there's certain things they can't share depending on what the product is, et cetera. But once they clean that up and get that, some of those things that the industry retains and digests very easily, all of a sudden the light bulb gets quicker. Right.
Yeah, and that would be my case against Alex Garvey. I got the case for it. I got the case against, but obviously I believe the case for is 10 times.
Yeah.
But and I mean, honestly, I think that also is cultural, I don't know if they get to the point where they're like everyone else, but I don't know if they need to either, because the tech is that good. But let's just say there is a very much like a streak to Karp that's sort of anti-establishment in a way, if you look into his background statements he's made, it kind of comes across that way as well. But to him, the sales guys are like the dudes in, the suits, and it's like, Silicon Valley where the sales guys are struggling against the engineers. Like, that's not what my product does, dude. Don't sell it that way, And I've heard him make comments where, hey, we're not going to sell out is what it sounds like. I would distill it down into. But really what he fails to miss is that to be able to scale, market, and sell a product efficiently is in itself innovation. That is on par with the same level of innovation you're creating in the software. It's just a different kind of innovation. And companies that are successful at doing that shit, 90% of the reason they succeeded is because they innovated on that front, because technology, little known secret, given enough time, anything can be done. Anything can be replicated, I mean, if you're the Chinese government, you know that, right? Chinese government does a really good job of copying shit, right?
Yeah, they do.
So the dirty secret in tech is that almost anyone can recreate what you've created, But it takes a special organization that can operationalize it and sell it at a profit and scale it out to tens of thousands of employees. That's fucking hard, So that, I think on a cultural level, they're making the right hires, I think, to bring in that innovation. It seems like it.
It's so spot on what you said there. We saw the Salesforce guy. There's other people from multiple commercial organizations.
They picked up a hire from Oracle. He jumped ship,
And it's not selling out. It's, I think you said earlier offline, it's meeting the customer where they are.
Yeah, exactly. You have to meet the customer where they're at.
Can you elaborate on that for our audience? Because I think
that's
not miss.
So Palantir's got a product that they will often say the industry doesn't yet know they need it, and it's because they have a way of operating that is several years ahead of any other way you would probably operate. We were talking earlier about how we're changing SaaS, but every other company is thinking how do I integrate more SaaS? It's only now that there's these leading indicators that people are going to start asking these questions. And so you can't speak in a way in which the customer just can't relate to you, and or worse, what you're saying alienates or threatens them in some way,
or makes them feel inferior.
Yeah, exactly. So meeting the customer where they are is speaking a language they understand and solving a problem they know they need to solve, and then leading them to the place where they need to get to. They need to get to this other place, but you're going to help them along the way with lots of wins and lots of education. But you need to have a way to approach them that is speaking their language and solving real tangible problems they can put their finger on today,
Okay, so let me pause you there because I have a question for you. You're the expert here.
Yep.
Could they, or do you think that the product can be simplified enough to where specific simple problems within IT can be solved and sold, I don't know, let's just say below 100K for the SMB customer? Can you solve IT challenges in different things with Foundry or do you have to buy the whole kit and caboodle and it just can't be compacted down to that?
They're kind of two unrelated questions. I'll answer them separately, but I'll give you an answer for both.
Yeah, sure.
The cost issue is yeah, Foundry can reach the SMB market for sure. It's when they want to do that,
True.
So like,
good point.
But yeah, there's nothing that I would say would be ingrained in the technology or like some problem in the technology that wouldn't allow them to offer it that way. And so I think it's just they have a roadmap and a plan of when they want to get there, and that's not right now.
Because there's not a lot of overheaded software, right? I mean,
there can be
like a bunch of capex that they have to do to spin up a
weird. There are ways in which you can make a product more multi-tenant friendly and therefore lower your operations costs. And I've done videos on those related to like a pool model versus a silo model for SaaS, and there are definite operational efficiencies in cost. You can drive down cost differently in those models. So like, but I think with Palantir right now, their main focus hasn't been to reach the SMB space, and it's really been to
and I would agree with that. And we had conversations. It's not right. I mean, hey, if you can get a $50 million contract or a 100K deal, which one are you going to spend? And they probably are going to take the same amount of sales cycle.
Yeah.
You're going to go take that.
And also like those big customers will generate more network effects more quickly, because they're automatically coming with an affiliate pool of hundreds of people, or hundreds of other companies. So like you get one of those big companies, you've now got a network of like 50 to 100 other companies that you're automatically going to go after. And like, so you can start generating network effects much faster than if you're in the SMB space where no one works together. Like,
listeners, listen to this man. He knows what he's talking about. Like, there's a reason, because people get so impatient, don't we all? We all want our cake to eat it too, and we want to see our big returns. But let's take a step back and look at their customer base. These aren't just any old enterprise customers.
It's across every damn industry.
Exactly.
Like find an industry that's not
right. And you don't see this like BP. You're looking at Hyundai, Stellantis with 8 EVs and so you start seeing this and it's like network effects. Exactly. Network effects.
Exactly. That's what people gotta.
You gotta think that way, or else you take it for granted. Well, they only have 250 some odd customers with all the agencies of government. Maybe call it 400. But these are, good luck. Who else do you know who's retained the Army and the military government for 17 years as a customer?
Yeah, dude, like these guys they know what they're doing, and so again, this comes back to the CEO. He just has to be right, But I think he is. Honestly, at the end of the day, I think the strategy is going to be proven right. But and we'll all be thanking Carp for it eventually, I hope. At the end of the day, I think people just need to chill out a little bit and it's
only been benign in public 2 years.
I would also say, like, don't threaten, don't criticize things you don't fully understand either. Like if you haven't watched this podcast, maybe you don't know any of this stuff yet. Maybe not be so quick to criticize.
If you don't, I'm not trying to discourage listeners and viewers of, if you don't understand the technical aspects, that you can't invest in Palantir. But don't throw stones at a glass house if you haven't understood what are the challenges that developers have with CI/CD pipeline. The challenges, because then you appreciate the 10x. Like
don't get mad at a strategy just because you don't understand it. Like try and steel man it, and go like, what would be the possible reasons I would do this, steel man it, and then you might go, oh, okay, that might make sense in this context, but you have to be right. Motherfucker has to be right.
And that's where I guess you have to know, and I've always said this in investing, is know your time horizon, know your risk level.
I don't want to talk about the investment side, but let's
sorry.
Let's bring it back to the strategy.
Financial advice is just saying, do your research, right? And if you need money, don't put it in the market if you needed to pay your house off. Like think smart, like think logically, make sure, because things will take time to develop. And I don't think people have given Palantir time to evolve. It's not like they're deep in debt or anything. They're building world-changing technology. And once again,
I wasn't speaking to the investment strategy of people. I was speaking more to like the criticism of CARP over the go-to-market strategy, which I also am critical of, but I'm critical because I understand it, but I'm critical because it's a high risk, high reward strategy, you know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I always say the competition gets a vote, right? So like you have a strategy, you may play out perfect, but if the competition gets a vote, motherfucker, and if Microsoft and you know, like Snowflake start eating away at your potential customer base, that
That's
changes the game,
there
you
you
know?
go. That's my that I won't say that's my bear case. I'll say that's my mindful risk management thinking of
Yeah.
you only have as you said as the technologist,
You don't have forever.
you only have so much time before people start to catch up and realize you're onto something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then people will emulate and you'll get 20 copies of the same idea. Like we see that all the time
Yeah.
across SaaS, you know. So like
Oh yeah.
there's 50 million SaaS products that all look identical, you know.
Oh,
So as I mean, this is part
you
and parcel of
said
the
it.
industry. Yeah. So like the competition gets a vote, and so the execution risk is huge if they're even if they're right on where you need like all of this building the verticals and everything, what the effects down market can have a huge effect on you, you know, like, and unfortunately that's just the reality that the rate of adoption in technology often dictates like who wins in the end. And it's often like a good I remember someone in my comment section had said, hey, give me some examples of inferior technology that wins, and like I responded within about 15 or 20 minutes off the top of my head, and I was like, well, Redshift, I mean, it's like probably the worst columnar database and it has 65% of the market.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a low friction offering from Amazon. And we can go down the list of Amazon services that are the exact same thing, worst tech, but has the biggest adoption rate, right?
Isn't that
And
amazing?
yeah, but it's like that is when I say things that can happen down market, because the thing that has the highest adoption rate also has the highest certification rate and has the highest developer adoption rate. And like, and so like these things start to snowball, and it's like, well, if only 10 people are trained in Foundry and there's 10,000 that are trained in this other thing, me as an organization, I start making different decisions based on the talent pool, not the technology, you know?
Do you think that IBM and Accenture can help with that? Do you think that they do we need do we need to
I
see
was very unimpressed with IBM's sales team, to be honest.
I can't say any comments, but I met some IBM people and I will plead the fifth.
Yeah, I was very unimpressed, and so no, I don't think Palantir's getting nearly as much out of it as IBM is with the ability to get contacts and maybe have meetings they wouldn't otherwise have. You know,
What
is my
about Accenture? Accenture's a big one, and I'd love to see them
but
get.
that was pre-existing, right? I mean, that'd been around for like 5 years, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. I guess what I'm to your point about certifications, I want to see a Foundry certification program that's fully
Mhm.
excited. Let's get everyone learning. Let's get and then all of a sudden you go to the masses, right? Because
Yep,
Cisco built a business. I
yep,
mean, built a entire framework to hold make a networking guy feel special because he has a Cisco certification. You're not going to fire me. You're going to pay my six-figure salary
yep, yep, yep,
because I'm certified in Cisco and you need Cisco. And
yep,
this was years ago and things of the world's changed, but I could just see that like if you have the tech that's 10x better and you
yep.
teach people and I would think that would be more affordable than hiring a mass amount of employees.
Yeah, yeah.
Now there's some risk around people goofing up stuff and not delivering the product as it should
The
be or
dev community and the certifications are huge. Yeah, like I always say, like don't overthink it. It's a prereq, you know, like this is prereq. You have to do this. And for all the reasons you mentioned, not the least of which is like the developers have a vested financial interest in certifying on platforms that get them big opportunities, you know.
Mhm.
um, and the more of those opportunities are out there, it's like it's becomes this snowball, you know, and like everyone wants to cert. Right now the certifications are closed, so you have to be a Foundry customer to get into the certification. But I will say the training materials are awesome. Foundry, when you install it, comes with a whole Foundry Academy, and it's got like all of the,
Really?
yeah, training videos, documentation,
That's
exercises.
encouraging.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like I was able to learn a ton, you know. So I think most developers could probably just get access to Foundry, go through the academy and take the certification and they're good to go, you know. I think that for them to open it to the public could also be like, you could do it in a 2-day intensive, like go to a conference 2 days and you're certified, at least at the lowest level, like not high level
But maybe
certification.
that goes to when they're ready to do that, when they
Yeah,
want. It's
yeah,
their
when they want to. But I think that's coming. Like I do believe that you'll see the beginnings of that soon, because I've been working with their developer advocacy group and like trying to figure out, ways in which we can engage developers immediately too, even if they don't have Foundry access. And so from the momentum that I'm seeing them put into that, even those conversations, along with some other talks we're having, like I think they're getting ready. So
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say, like, where you've been around in all the different technologies and different sectors,
yep.
where do developers go to see, hey, this is everyone's using this? Like, I always heard, like, on Motley Fool, they'd talk about, hey, you want to see if a stock's really good on software, go to GitHub and see what people are saying or how much downloads they get. So MongoDB gets a ton.
Yeah.
um is there things that they can be doing there in that arena or advocacy somewhere to get the word out that, hey, we got this awesome platform that will make your life easier?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm an advocate for them, but like getting,
Yeah, but we want more advocates.
I brought them a couple that hopefully you'll hear about soon. Um, so yeah, uh, there are going to be what you, I guess you would call influencers, in tech.
Palantir, I'd like to do a side hustle influence. I'm your guy right here. Yeah, see, I
Well,
love your platform. I'm
I think there'll be a
for
set of,
sales. I can't
right,
do the
right.
developer stuff.
I think influencers are a good way to introduce developers if they're respected and they can like also reach a certain amount of other developers, and that is a good way to like get credibility, like so that because developers are approached every day for new tech, like not
Mhm.
only via email and spam, but like just
Yeah, I
in
was gonna say, because people keep their developers locked up. You don't get, you don't get
but like Slack too, like
yeah.
we all have channels in Slack where we like post new tech and talk about it, so you're constantly seeing new stuff, but the general attitude is like, fucked, and one more thing that does this thing, and like, oh my God,
Mhm.
really? And like,
Mhm.
I just spent 2 years implementing this other platform. Why would I switch over to this other one? And someone's got an argument for or against that.
And what you just said there is so key.
Yeah,
Can you elaborate on
yeah,
technical,
there's a high switching cost once you've adopted a
yes,
technology, So like, because
even
like
if
what
it's
happens,
inferior, right?
well, yeah, even if it's inferior, because like what you're doing is you're building all this tooling around it. Like for example, like at my work, we use React, and we use Next.js and NX, which is like tools for building a mono repo and then also tools for building React applications. But then we enhance it. We built an entire framework on top of it with our own tooling, our own automation, our own training materials, our own boot camp. We have an early development pipeline for apprenticeship opportunities built on that. Like it's a lot of fucking work. That's a year and a half's worth of work, and it delivers massive value. Now someone comes to me and says, "Well, let's try this other framework." I'm like, "Fuck you! We're not trying that framework." Like,
Yeah,
no. So
yeah.
there's a high switching cost once something becomes heavily leveraged. It's just like anything else too.
And if you spend a lot on it too, I would have to think you go back to the boss and go back to the CFO and say, well, I didn't pick the right solution, but this one over here, if we shed out some more money, this is
Yeah.
only 18 months past what we already bought.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that you lose credibility with management and you might be not in a good
It's not too
situation.
bad. I mean, like it's more the migration effort is what they look at, and then I mean, because like in IT, there's this accepted idea that like the day you go live is something that's like the day it's deprecated. It's like pretty much at that point you're then working on the complete rebuild and refactor of the new thing. Um, that's just kind of how
Dave, let
software
me
is.
ask you this, since you've done it,
Like,
is it painful with Palantir? Is it painful to get platforms switched over? Or what I've been reading on and seeing videos on is you don't have to switch to your renewals up or whatever. Basically, we can connect Foundry to all these other things you've already invested in.
yeah, yeah.
And then as those renewals come up, you dispose of that and we'll bring more into the fold on the actual OS itself.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a lift and shift kind of way you could approach it. And they have first party integrations with like Snowflake and Databricks and SageMaker, like a lot of the products companies use. In fact, they have the deepest integrations out of any company I've seen, the broadest range of data source integrations across SaaS, along with the best first party integrations for the big data platforms like Databricks and Snowflake and SageMaker. So they definitely did their homework in figuring out like where are customers at today and what tools are they using, and they came up with the tech that makes that easy so you could like lift and shift, right? But it doesn't help customers if you're speaking in a flowery language that sounds more like philosophy than like, you know, like a practical application of that. And so, but then they recently shifted about 6 months ago to explain like, no, like we actually have first party integrations into Databricks and here's how you do it. And they start publishing articles about like,
I was say, do you ever see them publishing videos to say, look,
they are, yeah.
you bought this.
Yeah.
Let me show you how we enhance it.
But they only do, what sucks is they only do like a 30-second segment in a broader 20-minute video, you know, whereas like it would be cool to see some deep dives on like actually using Databricks inside Foundry.
Yeah.
You know? And like Snowflake, for example, too, because then
it gives the aha moment, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Because there's some engineer out there somewhere who's gonna go, oh shit, that solves problems A, B, C, D, and E that I have, you know.
Yeah, don't tell me you can do it. Show it.
Yeah, show it.
What exactly. Customers want to see. Show me this, and then also now
the integration. You know? And then yeah, the engineers will connect the dots on their own. But the cool thing is once you do that, like once you hook an engineer like that, they're fucking in, dude. They'll go down the rabbit hole, you know.
Especially if they're high in the totem pole, they're gonna fight to get that platform adopted.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm at. So like, yeah, but like, there's still substantial resistance because again, I think it's just they're really ahead of the game, and people are starting to figure out that they need these tools, but they're not quite there yet. They're almost there.
Okay, I know I've taken you over an hour, and but I do have because I could talk to you for hours, but and we're gonna cut this up so people can digest it at one segment at a time. But I have to have a better understanding of edge compute and how this relates to Palantir. And what I'm trying to understand and wrap my head around is you have all of these customers using hyperscalers. So that's AWS, GCP, and Azure for our viewers. So these public cloud companies that own most of the market. You know, you have Oracle, Alibaba, and Snowflake, and others, smaller percentage of the market share. If I'm someone who's getting a massive amount of my cost in my AWS bill and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
Is there
everyone is like that in that same boat?
And then they got their hooks in you.
Yeah.
Is there anything that Palantir can do to reduce that cost by bringing some of that to the edge?
I think it's not just the edge. It's like, so a huge amount of the way in which cloud providers lock you in is all the code you write to tell the cloud provider how to provision your app and deploy it out there. The edge networks are just one part of that. There's also just the standard data centers, region locations where that gets deployed, but it's all described in this proprietary language they have, you know. HashiCorp helps with that, with Terraform, you know, and like that. But it's still relatively, you're still writing a lot of like proprietary code, you know, in order to deploy it out. So a lot of the reason that, so what is the operating margin at like AWS? I think it was like 60% or something, just obscene total, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think's driving that, you know? Well, it's that they know they can do what you described, which is continually ratchet the price, you know, as your usage starts to increase. And that's how you get to someone like Lyft, who then has to like negotiate a $300 million deal to avoid that continued ratchet problem, you know. And that sort of underscores the fact that what locked them in wasn't where they deployed, whether it was the edge or their data centers. What locked them in was all the infrastructure as code they had to write in the AWS specific way of doing things that makes it impossible to take this generic compute that should just be generic and now move it out somewhere else. And they probably also lock themselves into AWS proprietary services for things like messaging and databases and stuff like that.
So once you've done that and you've written your code in that proprietary manner, are you SOL?
Pretty much, yeah. You got total rewrite on your hands, you know.
So for our folks watching, that's refactoring or rebuilding all of your applications. That for some of these, like Lyft and other companies that have spent years building, that's probably not going to be able to be upsold to the
Totally.
CEO of
And
it.
to give you an idea of the amount of code, like for something as simple as a generic CRUD API, which is like just an API that just moves data around, the ones that I'm writing that are really basic, it's like 10 times the amount of infrastructure code as the API code, right? So like there's like literally 10 times as many lines of infrastructure code for AWS as, and now I wasn't using Terraform for this, but like I was using the AWS CDK, but like still I had 10x the number of lines of code to deploy the fucking thing as I did to write the thing, you know? So
So at
like,
that point, is it fair to say that when AWS gets you and you've been there that long with them, they have your hooks, you're not moving off of that. You may multi-cloud it and take some into different clouds and balance it out for disaster recovery and for performance and business
you
continuity.
want to, but it's really hard to do that. So like even, so like
But isn't
even
that where
back in the
Snowflake comes in?
no. It's just like back in the day, like GCP, like back in 2017, they were going around and like trying to recruit people onto their platform. They're offering free compute. All you had, and they would even give you free consulting to migrate over your apps. And like virtually all of those initiatives failed. Like at the company I was at, it failed. And the reason is, dude, the amount of work involved is just insane. Even to take an existing workload and just run it on another cloud provider is super.
Wow. So it,
Yeah.
it is hard, because people say that in the industry, and I've always wondered how hard really is it.
Oh, it's fucking hard. Yeah. So they know they got you, but like the difference with Foundry, like, is that if you build your apps on Foundry, you now have a replacement for AWS. Like I literally will never write another piece of code that interacts with AWS or interacts with GCP. Like everything's going to be built in the Foundry ecosystem. But Foundry natively supports multi-cloud and edge deployment, you know?
Right.
So it's like, well, that's pretty cool because if all my apps are running on top of Foundry and they're all built in Foundry, then I can basically just take the compute layer down to the lowest level, right? Which is like EC2
Yep.
and S3
Yep.
and IAM, like that's it. It's really, I'm only paying for like really 2 or 3 services. And then because they have Apollo and they can deploy that across GCPs too, well, then they become commodities, then it's just like, you won't fucking reduce my pricing? Fuck you. I'll turn off your workload and like go triple it on GCP, because GCP is willing to give me free compute for 6 months and then drop the rate by 20%, So like,
So it may not be that I build or refactor everything in Foundry, but I will start building new stuff in Foundry.
yeah,
That probably, to what our earlier conversation,
yeah.
could communicate to the AWS native legacy stuff that I have in there, and I could make do with that and figure out ways I can.
Foundry will be the connective tissue because like Foundry just takes it where, fuck that, I won't go through all these APIs and everything else up here. I'll just connect directly to the data source, So it's like it can just backdoor all this. That's how they work with ERP too. Is they just backdoor and they go straight to the data. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited, man.
It's like Stalin was saying, it's like what AWS was for developers the last 10 years, Foundry will be for the next 10 years. And I really believe that because it does, at that point, enable what we want to see, which is sky compute, which is like the cloud providers are just this homogenous layer of compute. We don't really care about them anymore. But you need a platform that you can then build apps on that is distributable across all of them, and that's what Foundry really is.
So how much of this can Snowflake do?
Well, none of it right now. I mean, they claim to have this new native apps capability in their press release today that came out, but it's in a private beta. And it's also like not generic apps. It's like building data pipelines and stuff like that, Whereas like Foundry, you can build a generic app to do anything. It's like when I was saying before, like a Turing complete, like there's Turing complete programming language, means they solve all categories of problems. They do everything, Foundry has a application framework for building apps, all apps that can solve all categories of apps.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Like I said, they built Skywise on it.
Yeah.
They're building HyperAuto on it, right? So like
they're building platforms and products out of this that you're not going to do that in Snowflake.
No, this is a general purpose application platform, and in addition to all the other things it does.
You're basically creating alpha and new company value on the Foundry platform, whereas Snowflake is just a housing and lower cost reduction.
It's a brick in the wall, Snowflake's a brick in the overall
and
wall.
Foundry is the wall. It's a new wall.
Yeah, exactly. And so like,
oh man, I'm so excited. You just got I can talk to you for hours about this stuff. Like it's just because I live and breathe the SaaS world, and talk to customers and deal with the challenges, and
Yep.
everything you're saying makes complete sense. And when people say, well, you weren't profitable and you've been around for 17 years, we were working on creating something that's never been done before and supporting the military and doing something that
the compute required to do something that wasn't even like publicly available till 2017, you know. So
like what they were doing was so and forward thinking, and what they were building.
Yep.
Taking a line out of cart, building programs or building software for tomorrow that you don't know you need today.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah, I'm just geeked more than ever, and I'm so over indexed in Palantir stock. I just want to get more. Like, the more and more aha moments, you know.
Once again, not financial advice. I have a relationship.
No. I just, the technology is so good. I need to get some more people who work there who I don't know if they could jump on the podcast just to say what they're about. That, you know, I mean, I think that more people need to hear from
I don't know how open they have a strict social media policy. I think.
I'm sure. But they're doing good things, and you look at their IR stuff. Like, there's a new announcement I mean, I don't think we've ever seen, like, maybe 2 weeks ago with nothing new announced.
They're cranking. Like, you can see the contrast. In what's cool is, like, I can see the contrast from this time last year, you know. And what's interesting is, like, both from like a PR perspective, they're way more active, you know, on LinkedIn.
Very much so.
So good job, PR team. And the marketing's gotten better, so good job, marketing team. Like, it just seems like they're firing on all cylinders right now, whereas before it was like
disjointed.
Yeah, disjointed, not working together. Now it feels like everyone's working together and they're delivering on equal value in each team. So, like, yeah, dude, like, I see this massive improvement. To me, it's like the metrics I'm looking at, or I'm sort of looking at the customer count, and, like, I think we're seeing good movement. I think last year we saw great movement, and that's the metric I look at to see, like, how well are they executing, you know, how well, and our customers absorbing what they're saying, and is the technology working? And everything I look at in my own experience with it, I'm like, yeah, there's no way this company doesn't become successful. And
I look at the customer count, like you said, for sure. Net revenue expansion. So are people buying more and building out more? And then also the contribution margin, meaning are you getting more from those current customers year after year after year, and they're contributing more as they get through the build or the acquire, scale, expand phase, expands where we see that big jump. So you could have partnerships announced or contracts here, but they may not recognize revenue until they've completed that actual contract. And then also, you just said that they're now usage-based pricing. Like, I know I put a video out there. I didn't know that was the standard. I thought it was like, oh, if you want usage pricing, here you go. You can try this. But now they're meeting customers where they're at, which is also encouraging.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, the introduction of usage-based pricing, I think, was, like, big, because that's what a lot of people expect, you know, especially when you're just starting with a product, you know. So I think they're making all the right moves, and, you know, I think by 2023 people will be really happy about the progress in the developer community, and, you know, where they're going with the platform. I know that what I want to see, what the thing I've been telling them is like, I want as many engineers as possible to build a business on this thing, you know. So, like, launch a startup, build value on it, because, like, the true potential of this platform is 100 times what Palantir could ever reach with it on its own. Once you give it to the developers, it's like, who knows what they'll create with that shit, you know. Like,
do you think that then, so what you're advocating is, why not open up Foundry for builders for more startups?
Yeah, like, why not make it like for everyone, like Amazon is, you know, and, like, all you need to do is go create an account and put in a credit card, and you're good to go, man. You know, like, remove the barriers to entry, but, like, it's baby steps. I think it's you know, there has to be a way in which to explain it to people, so it just doesn't fly by them, you know.
Well, hopefully they watch this video. I mean, everything you've explained to me resonates, and it just more confidence and conviction. And this is the kind of deep dive that you want to do if you're going to be a shareholder of a company, is you want to understand from the ground up. Like,
Yeah,
I can go to
definitely.
bed. I can go to bed every night sleeping like I invested in something that I believe in. I believe in full conviction, and I have no qualms. I have no, and if I lose everything and I'm wrong, it's a great. I feel I've done everything I can on research, and I can't see where they don't succeed 10 years from now. Will
Yeah,
it be bumpy?
either way.
Sure, it's going to be bumpy. Right now, we are in bumpy, but at the same time, what could be bumpy now when others are in fear could be better when everyone's cheering on Palantir, and all of a sudden we see the institutional uh buyers come in and all of a sudden bring big money in, right? It's still predominantly a retail stock.
Yeah, totally.
So
Sorry, I had to shut my camera off for a second. My eyes are. I got
oh, no
super
worries.
sunburned
I know how
yesterday.
that gets. No worries. Looking at a
I got, like,
computer screen, I actually have 4 screens and the laptop.
you know,
So
I was surfing yesterday for a while too, and there's this like
oh,
massive.
you're back up and on the boards. Awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm good now. But like let me turn my fan on. The sun was like super glaring, and like I got sunburn in my eyes, and then I have to stare at a monitor all day.
Yeah,
It's just,
not good. Not good.
once I-
Um, well, this definitely just gives me more conviction. Hopefully, it gives our listeners more conviction in Palantir and what they're creating. We appreciate everything that you're doing uh, on the developer side
yeah,
and being an
absolutely, man.
advocate. Palantir, if you're listening, I'd be an advocate for you for the marketing side.
Absolutely,
You
man.
know,
No, I think they really appreciate the YouTube community quite a
yeah,
bit. I mean,
man.
that's
I
how they
mean,
found me, you know.
yeah.
So
I mean,
yeah,
it's good technology that makes our world better. And I want to invest in things that make the world a better place. And I believe they're doing that. And
absolutely, dude. They're solving real problems. I wouldn't be investing all my personal time doing this for free if I didn't really believe in it, you know.
yeah, I mean, it's same here. Like I'm on projection for this entire year of the podcast, $400. So YouTube, just so you guys know, YouTube doesn't pay a lot unless you got Tom Nash
My
viewers.
channel's not even monetized, you know. So
Right.
I get
Right.
nothing out of this, you
Like
know.
Tom Nash, my boy, he has like 300,000 viewers. That's when it becomes lucrative, people, but it
Yeah,
takes a lot of work. And my buddy Chris and Amit are hustling to get there.
yep.
But you and me have full-time jobs and families, so
Yeah.
it's kind
And
of hard to
like
do both.
I took tremendous risk to
You
do
know,
this. I could be
we're,
accused
we're
of
here
like,
up at 10:30 at night, probably. Oh well, you're in California time. It's
yeah.
still 8:30 your time. This is when we have time to do it, and so
No, I took a tremendous risk like doing all this, you know, like
yeah,
professionally, personally.
yeah,
Um, if anyone thinks I get any money out of this, they're out of their mind. I get no money out of this, you know, like I'm doing it because I actually believe in this technology. It's like, yeah, it's like being given early access to AWS before anyone else had access to it,
yep,
and you could figure out how you were going to build the future of software, you know. Like that's incredible. If you actually believe that as a developer, that's motivating, you know.
that
That's
is.
that's why I'm doing it. Is like I really do believe like this is how I want to build software in the future, and people are
You,
going to get there. I mean, when you see companies like Snowflake trying to emulate what they're doing, right? Then you start to go, oh, they're definitely on this. Microsoft too, right? With their
oh yeah, data mesh.
intelligent data platform. So like you're seeing companies start to try and talk and even use their vocabulary, you know, which is kind of interesting. So
Yep.
like we're they may be so far ahead, you know, we think, you know, they aren't meeting people where they are, but at the same time, the industry is quickly evolving to like adopt this kind of idea, you know.
Yeah,
So
no, very, very much so. So, well, we'll conclude there, guys. Thank you for watching this. We are going to cut this up into segments just so that way, maybe have one big video too as well. But remember, it's never too late to dominate your investments. And this is not financial advice, but hopefully entertaining and educational. Learn more about Palantir. Thanks again.
absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime, Tom. Appreciate it, man.